All right, so this is my first Song of Ice and Fire chapter review. The chapter was suggested by Another Doomed Pretender on Tumblr, also known as Reptoid Boffin on YouTube, and the chapter in question is Sansa's second one from A Feast for Crows. Now for Sansa, Arya, and Bran, the feast dance is essentially a training montage. They're kept isolated not only from each other, but from the major movements of the plot, and this allows them to focus more purely on their respective educations. We don't get to spend much time with any of them. We actually get more Victorian chapters from the feast dance than Sansa or Bran. But what we do get is super concentrated in its import and impact. The central subject of Sansa's A Feast for Crows arc is her hyper-compressed political education in a seminar of sorts Littlefinger has prepared for her, what we might call, to borrow from Shonda Rhimes, How to Get Away with Murder. At the end of A Storm of Swords, Littlefinger threw Lysa through the moon door, and Sansa's A Feast for Crows chapters deal with how he not only gets away with that crime, but in fact flourishes in its wake. And both Littlefinger and George Martin very much present this as a tableau for Sansa's benefit. Littlefinger is trying to mold her into his ideal partner, but what Martin is showing us, and again he does the same with Arya and Bran in the feast dance, is that the mentor is not fully in charge of the education. All three Starklings are exploring, experimenting, and learning outside those bounds, and we see that right away in the A Feast for Crows chapter in question, Sansa 2. Or rather, Alayne 1. Because of course one of the many ways A Feast for Crows shook things up in the series was by incorporating a broader range of chapter titles than simply first names. So for example, in the Dornish and Iron Islands plots, we get a, I think, really great series of evocative descriptions of the characters rather than simply their first names. And that ties into how Martin was flexing his genre muscles with those specific plots. He was trying out tonal and stylistic conceits that would seem weird or jarring if you just dropped them into the pre-established storylines. After all, the POVs in Dorne and the Iron Islands in The Feast for Crows, they weren't POV characters in previous books. So there weren't other chapters with their names on them, so there really was no change. There was nothing to lose, really. But with Sansa, there was a change. We did lose something. We lost her name on top of those chapters. And I know my first time through A Feast for Crows, I felt like that changed like a punch to the gut when I saw Alayne on top of that chapter for the first time. I mean, what did it mean? I mean, does Littlefinger have his hooks in her now? Or is this a long-standing change, or even a permanent one? Nope. And we know that right away in this chapter. Martin emphasized that in the first paragraph. This is from Sansa's internal monologue. The rooms had grown chilly during the night. It will be worse when winter has it in its grip, she thought. Winter will make this place as cold as any tomb. Or in other words, winter is coming. So Sansa's stark self, that core is inviolate. Littlefinger really can't do anything about that, and I think it's great and important that Martin emphasizes that right away, even as he's changing up the chapter title. So anyway, the inciting spark, the incident that drives the conflict and drama of Sansa's A Feast for Crows arc, is the gathering together of the Lord's Declarant Coalition. They brought their armies together around the Giant's Lance, they've sent up a threatening missive to Littlefinger, and now in this one, they come themselves. The Lords of the Vale gathered together to toss out the interloper. But that's not what happens. Littlefinger wins, thoroughly and unambiguously. Why? Because they're bluffing. And he knows they're bluffing. He sets up this whole charade with Lyn Corbray just to demonstrate to Sansa how much they're bluffing. The problem the Lords Declarant are facing is that they're not actually willing to make war on the Arryn. And as long as Littlefinger is getting his support from the Crown, as long as he doesn't fold before their bluff, force is really the only way they're going to get Sweet Robin away from him. You know, ironically, if they'd been a little more devious, a little more Littlefinger-esque themselves, they might have been able to beat him. But as Bronzion says, he's not afraid. And his allies aren't the Florence or the Ironwoods, and, you know, the stakes aren't as high or as personal for the Lords Declarant as they are for, say, Wyman Manderly. Which is why you get this really great description from Sansa of what it is they've been up to. It was not quite a siege, not as yet, but it was the next best thing. Yeah, it's a fake siege. I mean, this is political theater with emphasis on the theater. And the hollowness of this whole charade really undercuts the values that the Lords Declarant are purporting to uphold. And that is exactly what Littlefinger wants Sansa to take away from this. Look at these paper tigers, he's saying to her. Look at how easily I take them apart. Look at how tenuous their hold on this whole system really is. But what keeps this from being glib or shallow, what emotionally grounds these chapters, is this. This whole dispute is ostensibly about Lysa and Sweet Robin, right? It's about what to do with Sweet Robin now that Lysa is dead. But neither side, neither Littlefinger nor the Lords Declarant, actually care at all about Lysa or Sweet Robin. I know brat is too kind for this kid, but, you know, Sweet Robin, he's a scared, isolated child who's lost his mother, and he's a puppet and a pawn, and he's being poisoned to death. And all his lords care about in the face of that is squabbling and scrapping over his inheritance. They don't care about him at all. And Lysa, horrible things were done to and by Lysa, right? And I think we're supposed to feel pulled in two different directions when it comes to her character. But her death is unambiguous. She was murdered. Horribly. And in her last moments, she learned that the person she devoted her life to never cared about her at all. And her death is the inciting incident. Again, right, the spark for these chapters. It's the whole sorts of the drama and the conflict. It's, okay, is Littlefinger going to get away with this? But Lysa as a person is so disrespected by everybody throughout this process. And even her death is negated and swallowed up by other concerns and pre-existing narratives. And that right there, that's the central pattern of A Feast for Crows, right? Same deal. Same process happens with Oberyn and Dorne, with Balin in the Iron Islands, and especially with Tywin in King's Landing in the Riverlands. A Feast for Crows, it's a very well-titled book, right? It takes place in the graveyard left behind by a storm of swords. And, if I had to sum up what it's about, I would say it's about death and not getting your shit together. It's about failing to reckon with your own mortality and your own blind spots. Brienne is kind of the exception that proves the rule, right? She's like the one candle flame flickering in a dark room. She defies that pattern, but at every turn she's reminded about how alone that leaves her. And what I love about Feast and what I love about Dance is with stuff like this, Martin wasn't coasting. When you're talking tone or theme or character or setting, he's always pushing the envelope. He's never resting on his laurels. The series is going to keep shedding its skin and keep on changing until it's done. That's really what I love about it. Anyway, back to the chapter. So there's some interesting class dynamics going on here, where Sansa can't wear Arryn or Tully colors around the Lord's Declarant, and Littlefinger can't be near the High Hall of the Arryns as long as they're around, because most unorthodox, and etc. But in case you're wondering if that makes Littlefinger a little more sympathetic, if you're thinking, okay, at least he's got this interesting class angle on his side, then he goes in for the kiss. And see, this is what a purely class lens on Littlefinger really misses, is that at his heart, Peter Baelish is the man who said to Sansa, okay, you're my daughter, and here's how you kiss me. First and foremost, he's not a mastermind. First and foremost, Peter Baelish is a creep. That is his archetype. That is the core of his character. I think it's telling that we don't meet him through Ned's eyes, right? We don't see him first on the small council doing political things. We first meet him through Catelyn's POV. We first meet Peter Baelish as he's kidnapping his childhood crush so he can creep on her some more. But, having said that, much as I hate Littlefinger, you gotta give him credit for how thoroughly he plays the Lord's Declarant in this chapter. He just sticks the knife in every turn. It's just perfect. Let me show you. Here's how he starts. Okay, so the Lord's Declarant have sent up this letter to him, right? The titular declaration, declaring their intent, why they're there, what they're planning on doing. And so his first move, when they show up, is to pull out their declaration, and he says this. I have been reading this remarkable declaration of yours, Peter began. Sorry, I have to do the pretentious beard strokey thing when Littlefinger's talking. It's just the law. Damn you, Mitch McConnell! But, these are the rules. I have been reading this remarkable declaration of yours, Peter began. Splendid! Whatever maester wrote this as a gift for words. I only wish you had invited me to sign as well. That took them unawares. You? Said Belmore. Sign? Well, I wield the quill as well as any man, and no one loves Lord Robert more than I do. As for these false friends and evil counsellors, by all means let us root them out. My lords, I am with you, heart in hand. Show me where to sign, I beg you. It's brilliant. Because, see, the Lord's Declarant are caught in this classic medieval mindset thing where you can't actually criticize the guy in charge, so you have to dance around him and talk about the false friends and evil counselors, and you, the Arryn, you are inviolate, you are divine, but everybody else... And they're right in this scenario, of course. They're right. Littlefinger is a false friend, he is an evil counselor, he is the the proverbial serpent in the Garden of Eden. It's all true. But coming in with that mindset leaves you so vulnerable to the kind of game Littlefinger is playing, where he's taking advantage of their unwillingness to outright say, okay, you, Peter Baelish, you are our enemy, and either you leave or we kill you. They won't say it and they won't do it, and he knows it, so he's constantly backing them into this corner by calling them on their bluff. And they try to beat him. They do. They up the ante and they go where was, oh yeah, take all you like, Littlefinger, Lord Belmore blustered, the boy shall come with us. I am loath to disappoint you, Lord Belmore, but my stepson will be remaining here with me.
He's not a robust child, as all of you know well. The journey would tax him sorely. As his stepfather and Lord Protector, Trent, I cannot permit it.
Simon Templeton cleared his throat and said, Each of us has 1,000 men at the foot of this mountain, Littlefinger. What a splendid place for them. If need be, we can summon many more. Are you threatening me, sir? Peter did not sound the least bit afraid. And why should he? He knows they're not going to do it. He knows they're not going to do anything about this. That's why I love that line, we have 1,000 men at the foot of this mountain. What a splendid place for them. Because I know you're not going to move them. I know you're going to leave them there. That's all they're doing. This is a show. This is kabuki theater. And that's what I love about it so much. Because on the one hand, this is a really tense scene, right? There are a lot of stakes. It's very loquacious. It's diplomacy. The heart's in your throat. On the other hand, there's a very deep satirical streak running through this scene. It's a bitter comedy of manners. It's the decorum has trapped these men in this room with each other, man and woman, in this room with each other, and they can't leave. So you think you'd almost be grateful then for Lynn Corbray cutting through the Guardian knot by calling them on their bluff. Oh, this talk makes me ill. Littlefinger will talk you out of your small clothes if you listen long enough. The only way to settle his sort is with steel. He drew his long sword. I mean, pretend for a moment that Lynn Corbray is actually one of the Lords Declarant. Forget for a moment that he's working for Littlefinger. If he was one of them, yeah, this is actually valid. I mean, he's said he's not going to come down. He's, seen their threat and he's calling their bluff. So, yeah, actually time to draw the swords. But as soon as he does it, the coalition falls apart. She saw Lothar Brune reach for his own sword, but before the blades could meet, Bronze Yone rose in wrath. Put up your steel, sir! Are you a Corbray or a Frey? We are guests here. Lady Winwood pursed her lips and said, This is unseemly. Between those two responses, you see how thoroughly screwed the Lords Declarant Coalition is. If their response to what is, face it, necessary aggression at this point is to say, no, that makes us a fray, and no, that makes us unseemly, you bring, as we saw with Ned, you bring that attitude to Littlefinger and he will just tear you apart. And he does. He does. As soon as Lynn makes that threat, he uses it to get everything he wants. He gets them out of the Eyrie, he gets them to acknowledge him as Lord Protector, he gets a year on his own, he puts them on their heels. And it's really quite spectacular. But again, if you're tempted to think, oh man, yeah, Littlefinger, pure badass, he's just pure awesome. Note what his plan is, what he's going to be doing with that year, how he's going to eventually take down the Coalition in the long term. This is what he tells Sansa. Redfort and Waynwood are old. One or both of them may die. Gilwood Hunter will be murdered by his brothers. Most likely by young Harlan, who arranged Lord Eon's death. In for a penny, in for a stag, I always say. Belmore is corrupt and can be bought. Templeton I shall befriend. Bronze Yone Royce will continue to be hostile, I fear, but as long as he stands alone, he's not so much a threat. And what about Lynn Corbray? How's he going to keep Lynn Corbray loyal? With gold and boys and promises, of course. Sir Lynn is a man of simple tastes, my sweetling. All he likes is gold and boys and killing. So his plan is basically corruption, pedophilia, and wait for the Grim Reaper to show up. I mean, again, the Lords Declarant, they're stuffy elites and they get their asses kicked, but they're right about Littlefinger. And give them credit, they're right to not want civil war in the Vale. And, what it comes down to is ultimately, Littlefinger is an avatar of death and corruption, and the Lords Declarant are just not up for the job of getting rid of him. Which is really, really pessimistic. It's a really dark chapter in that regard. The saving grace is our POV. The saving grace is Sansa Stark. Because again, this is ultimately about her. This is ultimately for her benefit. This is ultimately her political education. And give Littlefinger credit. He doesn't sit her down afterward and say, okay, did you see that? Let me go through exactly what happened and why it happened. He lets her come to him, and she does. She comes to him, I have to know, what will happen in a year? And she's the one who figures out, okay, actually, Lynn Corbray is really on your side. He's too useful to actually be your enemy at this point. That's the focus. And that's the light in all this. That Sansa will one day look back at this and think, okay, treat this as a cautionary tale. She'll look back and think, I'm not doing any of that. That's the hope here. That there's this hunger in her for knowledge and information and learning how the system works, that will one day transfer into a knowledge of wanting to create and build and be her father's heir and be the queen in the north and rule the goddamn world. There, I said it. And that, again, is the saving grace of this chapter, even amidst all the BS, all the hollow charades, all the rot within. Sansa's the true. She's the leader. And I have faith in her. All right. So that was that. I think that went pretty well.